I'm sure you've already seen 4,000 YouTube coaching videos out there where someone tells you the secret to all great singing is the cry mode, cry tone, whatever it is, cry technique. Getting that stretch in the vocal folds, getting that cry in there, that's going to let you sing like Chris Cornell, right? You've been following someone that's been doing vocal covers, something like that, Audio Slave covers, and all of a sudden they start doing videos about vocal technique. These are the things that have worked for me. And they tell you, cry is the secret to all great singing. And you're like, that's fantastic. So then you try it yourself, and it doesn't work. Really doesn't sound very good. And actually, sometimes it hurts a little bit, right? Very, very inconsistent. You've maybe felt it a couple of times, but it's really not helping you sing better, right? And then what you start to do is you start, instead of trying to learn how to sing, you start learning how to use the cry. And you start looking up more videos on the cry because this guy you really like told you to sing with cry, but it didn't work. Must be your fault, right? Must be my fault. And then you kind of get in that loop. And this was a loop I was stuck on back in the day pre-YouTube. It was more with in-person coaching. Instead of going to a coach and asking for their advice on how to sing better, I'd go to them. Can you teach me how to sing with cry? Can you teach me how to sing with vowel modification? This kind of thing. And I'm sure I was a very frustrating student because of this. So in this video, I'm going to take you through what cry really is and the reasons why it's not working for you. This is something that absolutely did not work for me at all for a very long time. It's something I use all the time in my singing now. And it is actually something that has changed my life by learning it, but there's actually more to it than just making the sound of a cry or a whinge or something like that. So let's find out what's going on with your cry. Let's work it out once and for all. So we're going to look at this a little bit differently. We're not going to use the usual terms that people use like chest and head voice like I usually do in my other videos, because we're going to try and sidestep your Dunning-Kruger effect that's probably been going on from watching so many YouTube videos. Your brain just recalls the shit you've already watched, and then you're almost watching the same video over and over and over again. Even if you buy courses or see new channels or whatever, everything's filtered through that first video you've seen. You're like, oh, cry, yeah, I know what that is. That's that tone that guy's using. So you can think of the voice as separated into two halves. So we've got a lower half and we've got a higher half, right? So we've got this split in the center. And on either side of this split, we have our vocal breaks. So we've got our lower range vocal break and we have our higher range vocal break. So basically going into the split and coming out of the split. Now these two halves, the lower half, we can think of as pressure and thickness. So we're using pressure and thickness to get our pitch. So this is a different way to look at registration. And in the higher range, our higher half after the split, we have stretch and tension. So pressure and thickness, stretch and tension. And they meet in the center. And this is what people usually call mixed voice. You're using a little bit of both. Now, if we're talking about pitching the voice, the more we try and use pressure and thickness to get our pitch, basically, so you're pushing at a G4 or something like that, you're bringing in the muscles from the lower end and you're basically just pushing. And this is what I used to do when I used to really struggle, especially on stage under pressure, live shows, that kind of stuff in the recording studio. I'd basically just default to the old ways. Even if I kind of thought I'd found it in a singing lesson or something like that, I would just default to, the push that I was so used to. So what is the cry and how does this relate to, our split vocal range? So number one, we've got our split in the center. So say this is E4. We'll look at a vocal line that's around about that range, kind of singing around that area soon. So I know you're used to me singing the really crazy high stuff and going through that. We're going to look at this dead center in the voice because this is actually the most important part of your voice. So say our break is at E4, right? Everything leading up to that E4 is controlled more by pressure and thickness within the vocal folds. So our vocal folds are this thick and it requires X amount of pressure to make them vibrate at the speed that we need for the pitch we're singing. So a high pitch is simply a faster vibration. It's not really a higher pitch, so to speak. And in our higher range, we're actually stretching the vocal folds. So it's like a thinness, and they stretch like an elastic band. If you would pluck an elastic band, it would change pitch as you're stretching it, that kind of thing. And in the center, we've got that meeting point. So this sound of stretching is engaged by, the stretch is actually controlled by the CT muscle. So you can find the CT muscle underneath your larynx, so where your collarbones are, and you got this little dip in here. And then if we make a head voice sound, so just ooh, ooh. We're not trying to go for, we're not trying to go for birth ritual Chris Cornell just yet. We'll get there. We just want to feel that. Ooh, Now, if we keep going for that same feeling, but we make it a little sadder, you'll actually start to get a bit more of a stretch in the vocal folds. And if you engage your pressure and thickness, you won't be able to sing it. And again, it doesn't have to sound good initially. So we're finding this muscle underneath the larynx, the CT muscle, and it's actually not really a muscle. It's a process, so to speak. So you've got cartilage and you've got ligaments, and these all work together to tilt the larynx and actually stretch the vocal folds. And this is where that kind of sad, yeah, kind of sound comes from, and the cry is coming from. This is how the voice sounds in this range. If you go for that cry sound, you get that stretch in there. Now, the reason that this hasn't been working for you, you probably, if you try it along with me there, just using the little ooh sound there, you see it comes along really easy and it's very obvious when I do it. You've been trying this in songs and it's just not working. Say you've been singing, ooh, they saw you today as you were leaving. Now they... And then we pressurize, run to on you down. And we get the Dave Grohl thing. This is exactly how I used to sing. And there's you'll probably notice that from some singers out there that, are really straining and pushing when they're singing. That kind of delivery, the punch. That's not how Chris Cornell sang, just as an example. It's not how, Warrell Dane sang in the higher range, in Nevermore and Sanctuary back in the day. It's just not how people actually sing. It's not how the voice works. So what we've got to do is get that stretch in there. So if we're singing at that kind of dead center point, I took a guess at an E. Ooh, they saw. That was pretty close. So what we're doing in the center there is we're kind of sitting between pressure and tension. And as we go for the lower notes, we add more pressure. And as we go for the higher notes, we add more stretch. So, ooh, they saw you today as you were leaving. So that's a pressure and thickness move, right? Ving. So my vocal folds are this thick, and I need X amount of pressure to make them vibrate, right? That same mechanism doesn't work in the high range. I'm going to explain to you why this isn't working for you in a minute. As we go up, now they run to on you down. You notice that's a different delivery. Now they run to on you down. Because I'm using that cry mechanism, that tilt, that stretch from the CT muscle to give me the pitch in the high range. And I'm not thinking of it as a tone. I'm not thinking of it in terms of a Chris Cornell voice. I'm not even thinking of it in terms of registers, so to speak. I'm basically just thinking of the cry as a way to give me the pitch at that point. I'm just going down, thinking down, engaging that tone very slightly to go with the tone, and then that's allowing me to stretch. And then I get my pitch in the higher range without needing to push. And you can, yeah! Again, you use that muscle for your pitch, and it's really easy to sing in that crazy classic kind of Chris Cornell style and range when you're doing that. Now, the reason it hasn't been working for you is that our voices are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. We're not really in control of our voices. Our voices are doing all kinds of crazy stuff and interpreting the way we feel and interpreting all of these kind of things to make an expression. A tool of expression is how I like to think of the voice. It's like when you're, I've gone over this in a couple of videos before, like when you're angry on the phone, your voice gets louder and thicker and this kind of thing. You didn't need to learn to do that when you were a kid, right? It's just something you do as a reflex, and we all do the same thing. Same thing as if you're really sad, man, this is just so awful. This is the worst thing ever. You get that tone in your voice, and again, we all pretty much do the same thing through different languages and cultures and dialects and all this kind of stuff. We still pretty much naturally make that same reflex sound. So our voice is interpreting the instructions it thinks we're giving. And your vowel is ultimately an instruction. I've had some comments before when I've gone kind of in depth on the vowels before. It's like, oh, did you really think that the key to Bon Jovi's success as a singer is pronunciation? You're an idiot. You suck. That's not what your vowel is. Vowel is not a pronunciation. Your vowel is ultimately a set of frequencies that gives us the illusion of a certain sound we're singing or illusion of a word we're singing beyond our speech range. And it's ultimately an instruction. If we're really wide within our spaces for our vowel, we need low frequencies to fill those spaces. So then the voice defaults to our pressure and thickness. So you're trying to use cry to stretch the vocal folds, but because you've got a big wide vowel, the body and the voice and the brain takes over, and it gives you the first half of the voice split, basically. It gives you the first half of your pitch mechanism. And you're trying to go up to that higher range. Ooh, they saw you today as you were leaving. Now they run and then you're shouting, right? Even though you're trying to go, it's sad, and you hurt your voice. It's really uncomfortable. It doesn't work, and it sounds like shit, right? So what we need to do is think of each aspect of the voice as basically an instruction. We can't just barrel through everything and then add a cry tone to it and we're going to be sweet. Things need to line up. So as I'm going for that cry in the tone, as I'm going for that stretch as my secondary pitch mechanism or higher pitch mechanism, head voice, so to speak, I'm narrowing my vowel, basically. And you've probably tried to do that before as well. You've seen a bunch of videos where you know, a guy on YouTube you really like says, you need to narrow your vowel. You try and do it and it doesn't fucking work. That's because you're not engaging the secondary pitch mechanism. You're not engaging your cry. You're not tilting the larynx. You're not stretching the vocal folds, and you're pushing through it. So, for example, the word run, run, pretty wide sound. Your accent's probably different to mine. Now, if I try and sing the word run, now they run to hunt you down. I'll try and do that and use the cry and show what happens. Now they run to one. I kind of get a weird mix of pressure and stretch, right? And again. That's pretty uncomfortable. I'm not used to singing like that anymore. So if we slightly narrow our vocal tract and slightly narrow our palate so that we can raise our palate more, that it being kind of spread like an umbrella, and we go for more of an like search or learn, not an American sound, learn, not an R with the retroflex R. I'm just talking about a heard, Now they run. Now they run to hunt you down. And there we get our cry, and it's all related to the vowel. So in most cases, the reason you're struggling to find the cry and the reason why it's so easy for someone that's a natural singer, which I definitely wasn't, I had to learn this stuff, and you're probably not a natural singer either if you're watching my channel. The reason it hasn't been working for you is that internal instruction from the vowel is working in the background, and you're, you know, kind of superficially trying to stretch the vocal folds, but the body's like, hang on, nut, wide space, pressure. The voice is all related. Everything is all related, and everything is ultimately a reflex. And this is why it's important to start from the smallest sounds you possibly can. I'm sure you have. I'm sure you've been through a vocal course before, or you've done some singing lessons or exercises or something like that before, and you get this exciting course, and then the first thing they say is like, "Now we need to start as quietly as we possibly can." Ooh, and you're like, "Man, this is boring. I don't want to do this. I can already sing loud." But there's a reason for that. Basically, we're trying to sidestep all those habits in there, and we're really trying to grow and build the voice from this very, very kind of baby point to avoid these habits that you have that are stopping you from singing with the cry. And I'm going to guess you guys out there that are struggling with the cry have been singing for a while. You've mostly just been doing it yourself. You've tried a bunch of different things, and you're already in the middle of developing your voice, right? That's a more difficult point to learn how to sing correctly. It's the point that I was at. I was singing for many years before I took singing lessons. Just got up with a band and started singing, right? So then I kind of had all these habits in there and things I'd worked out that worked. And if I, you know, kind of spread stuff, it meant I could kind of belt up to the, you know, the D4 or E4, that range I used to really struggle with. But then that stopped me from really getting my voice to that next range. So I had to really relearn a lot of those things. So remember, everything is linked. Nothing in and of itself is the secret to great singing, you know, and I'm sure that you've seen it all. I'm sure there's a few videos I've done before and you're like, I've seen all this before, man. Like, this is not the secret to great singing. What are you talking about? And that's because there's always more to it than that. You know, it's impossible to give you a singing course in a 10-minute YouTube video. You know, I do my best with that, but there's more to these things. And superficially, when someone's a natural singer, they're probably doing these things without realizing. They're probably singing with a fairly narrow vowel anyway. Maybe they just started mimicking one of the right singers. Maybe they mimicked the right sound. Maybe they just fluked it. Maybe they've got a higher voice. Who knows? And who cares at the end of the day? All we care about is what's going on with your voice. So ultimately, we need to tie in our narrowing of the vowel and our vowel modification with our cry and with our tone shifts. So if you're really wide, your body's going to take over and give you pressure. That's what's going to happen. You're going to have chest voice, what people call chest voice. And if you narrow that vowel, you're going to be able to actually stretch the vocal folds and go up into that cry there. So have a listen to your favorite singers when they do sing in that range. If you do hear them singing with a little bit of that cry in there, whether it's Dio, whether it's Chris Cornell, whether it's Adele, whoever it is, have a listen when they go for that cry sound, and you'll notice that their vowels are always narrowed, just like Chris Cornell singing run, not run, this kind of thing. Now, the reason, you've probably heard someone say this before. Now, the reason why people say approach things from head voice doesn't mean that you're actually singing, ooh, Ooh, they saw you today. Because that sucks, right? That's not how you want to sing. We're talking about the split in the center of our voice, and people are using the term head voice to describe stretching the vocal folds. Basically, we've got our chest voice down here. Ooh, we've got our head voice over here. So then you associate ooh with your head voice instead of actually using this stretch. Ooh, they saw you today as you were leaving. Now they run to hunt you down. Dogs lead the chase as you were bleeding. Now they run to hunt you down. And now you're starting to hear how this is all tied together, right? Our tone shifts in the voice, if you've seen my tonal intent video, actually line up exactly with our vowel shifts. 4 vowel shifts or 4 overtone shifts. There's 4 tone shifts within the voice. And ultimately, I break it down into 4 registers. We've got our split in the center. We've got our first break. So we've got 2 versions of chest voice. We've got chest voice. We've got mixed voice with chest in it. We've got our split in the center. And then we've got our head voice, if you want to call it that, with our split in the high range. And we've got our head voice version of mixed voice. And then we have head voice. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have our neutral space, our wider space, our narrowing space, and our fully narrow contracted space. And this lines up with our tone. Our bright ping, we find that. Go back through the last video I did, the magic process of finding the ping in the voice, finding the right vowel space. So we've got our bright ping, we've got our classroom voice, our Paul Rogers mixed voice. We've got our cry, our Chris Cornell cry. And then we've got our witchy tone up the top. And again, these all link together. You can't just sing with a big barreling wide vowel and expect to sing with the cry. And that's the reason it's been inconsistent for you. And that's the reason it hasn't been working for you. And that's the reason it fucking hurts when you try and just stretch your vocal folds when you've got this big wide vowel and your body's overtaking your instruction, basically taking over and giving you pressure. And you just get louder and bigger until your voice cracks and breaks and you shout. Has that been quick enough for you? Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. There's the tonal intent video, which is a really good one you should check out here. And we're going to talk soon.